Hello. Today is October 18th, and this is Athens Speakout, number 385, and this is the day before the final debate in Las Vegas, which will be on the 19th.
Right.
So we'll all be looking at the 19th. So the format is one in which Steve Annell is the moderator, and the title is going to be, "What Role Does Religion Play in Swaying the Voters for or Against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton?" And the format is between Dave DeWitt from the Athens News, a journalist. I am Robert Whaley, retired professor. And the moderator is Steve Annell. And he will ask a question of Dave DeWitt, how he handles that question. Then the second question will be the same to Robert Whaley. It'll limit us to about 3 minutes each. And we'll go through until we get to about the halftime. And then we'll have maybe 3 or 4 more. And then the second to the last question changes the whole format. The second to the last question is, from the bottom, to Dave, what do you predict on how Trump will do in Las Vegas debate on the 19th of October? And that same question will be addressed to me. What do you think? And then the conclusion is we'll have 2-minute summary for both Dave and I, and that hopefully we'll get through that. So, Mr. Moderator, you asked.
Yes, David, welcome to the program. Now, what do you believe religion plays as far as swaying voters for Trump or Hillary Clinton? What role do you believe religion?
Well, I've seen the polls and surveys that show that, by and large, the evangelical Christians, especially older evangelical Christians, plan to vote for Trump and are consistently supporting him at least as much as they supported Mitt Romney in 2012. So a survey released by the Public Religion Research Institute, and this was released after the controversial 2005 leaked audio tapes of Donald Trump bragging about sexual assault came out, showed that 65% of likely evangelical voters support Trump, and a poll from another religious group called Barna reported that Trump leads Hillary Clinton by 55% to 2% among likely evangelical voters in next month's election. And the main reason for this boils down to abortion and Supreme Court justice nominees. So while typically character does play a big role, especially among white evangelical voters, they are more concerned about the Supreme Court justices that Hillary might appoint and about protecting against abortion than they are about Donald Trump's character. And so he really hasn't lost that many votes among white evangelical Christians, according to the research that I've done.
And you think that Mike Pence being on the ticket helps among religious people?
Well, yeah, because he's more along their vein. He's an interesting case, though, because he considers himself an evangelical Catholic, which to me is kind of a contradiction, but I guess if he wants to create his own category, he has a right to. Typically, evangelicism is a Protestant venture that revolves around certain distinctions that people self-identify with. So conversion is the first one, and that's going through a spiritual transformation personally through the love of Jesus. That's the first of 4 criteria. The 3 others are activism, which means proselytizing, spreading the gospel, serving the community. Biblicism, regarding the Bible as the ultimate authority. And crucicentrism is what they call it, and that's recognizing Jesus' sacrifice on the cross as the only road to humanity's redemption. These are the 4 criteria that the National or Association of Evangelicals uses itself to describe evangelicals. What's interesting about it to me is that usually when polling organizations break down religious affiliations, they do it by different categories, very specific categories. So even though there are a lot of black evangelicals, for instance, in the Baptist religion, they don't. Black people vote Democratic in such large numbers that they just use, African American as one category and then white evangelicals as a separate category.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dr. Whaley the same question. What role does religion play in swaying voters for the two candidates?
I don't pay much attention to polls. They're all fixed. And I always pay attention to what the candidates say. So my answer is that the vice presidential nominee, Tim Kaine, in his debate on the issues with Governor Mike Pence, I thought he was right on the issues from my religious point of view. He was right on Social Security, no cuts. Right on peace, wants higher taxes to pay for Social Security. I misread there. In Social Security, no cuts. Pence, on the other hand, wanted higher taxes to pay for Social Security. And thirdly, Pence wants to privatize Social Security. Kaine is a liberal Roman Catholic of the John F. Kennedy School. Pence is unique, as Dave DeWitt just said, a conservative Catholic who calls himself a Catholic evangelical, a unique interpretation. And this could well be the religion of the future, because I think that...
Robert, would you try to define what that means for the audience?
Evangelical?
Yeah, what Pence is. You say
Pence was born and raised a Roman Catholic.
Right.
And the Roman Catholic believes, the good Roman Catholic believes, that the Pope is the vicar of Christ. That's the conservative view of Catholicism as of Pope Pius XII. Now, John the 23rd is the most radical pope in 500 years, who downplayed all of that dogmatic 1500s religion and said, we, the new Catholics, forgive the Protestants, we forgive the Orthodox, we're now interested in humanity, we're denouncing the nuclear bomb, and some of the Catholics, the old Catholics, were saying, what's happened to the Pope? Is he communist? You see, you don't have the Latin Mass, you don't have this, don't have... Well, this has shook up Catholicism.
Yeah.
And John Kennedy was right on that track. So then the death penalty and civil rights become more important to the new liberal Catholic of the John Kennedy school. And Pence is in that philosophy. Mm-hmm. He's just as liberal as Kennedy, if not more so. And Francis, the new pope, is in some ways more liberal than John the 23rd. So the Catholic religion is in flux, and the Protestant religion is in flux. And people are moving in two different directions. The Southern Baptists are becoming more conservative and going along with this hard line on abortion, which they didn't used to do before World War II. But so they've kind of allied themselves with the conservative Catholics who think that abortion is the key issue. So that's where I see this. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So anyway, and the next point is that this new interpretation of religion, then, according to Pence, lumps together evangelicals and conservative papal authority. So he's got that right. We don't know what's going to happen. Kaine, on the other hand, supports Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court decision made in 1973.
Right.
And Kennedy supported that, and most of the liberal Catholics and Protestants support that. And the conservatives are trying to chip away, and the Supreme Court conservatives are trying to chip away at Roe versus Wade and get it toned down and maybe repealed. And that's going to be that's what the issue is on the Supreme Court. Who's going to be the ninth justice? And will he support Roe versus Wade, or is he going to give the evangelicals and the hardline conservative Catholics a new voice? Who knows?
Robert,
Yeah.
where are these religious votes coming from in the United States? Are they coming from the South, or are they coming from the North? Just every state.
Every state has religious believers, and where Trump has alienated the women is that he's put sex on top, and they think that he is a very bad Christian. They don't believe in his so-called Presbyterianism. You don't go around seducing women and using four-letter words and doing shows which are really kind of soft pornography, okay? Well, the vote is going to determine that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Trump is scheduled to lose a lot of women voters in all age brackets. And Pence is, if elected, wants to pass a restrictive anti-abortion legislation from the vice president's chair, and presumably he's going to ally with Trump. But many people think that Pence is playing a game. He really doesn't want Trump to win, that he's really sticking his campaign out for running himself, assuming that Trump loses. Well, that's internal guessing game when no one knows what Pence really believes.
David, do you want to elaborate on what Dr. Whaley had just said?
Or disagree, or?
Well, no, I think that it's correct as far as the. I don't think that in his public life so far, in 3 decades of public life in the United States, that Donald Trump has ever displayed any sort of very Christian ethos as far as conducting himself. He seems to glorify a lot of the things that Jesus' teachings would shun, such as opulence, wealth, self-centeredness, egocentrism, misogyny, sexualization of women. All these things seem antithetical to most Christian teaching, and I think that creates a real problem for especially evangelicals who have traditionally placed such a high emphasis on character. And in this election, there's really no defending Donald Trump's character. He calls himself a Presbyterian and claims that he attends the church, but even the church itself that he claims to be a parishioner of denies that he is really truly a member.
Okay, David, let's follow that up. You've both discussed Donald Trump. Let's talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Is this to Dave or both, or me?
If you would like to start
Okay,
first, go ahead.
I would like to say that Hillary calls herself a liberal Methodist, and she has done work assisting blacks and white women and children as her Christian duty. And this is what Bill Clinton says. She was interested in social service before she became interested in politics. And because Bill was elected Attorney General of Arkansas and then Governor of Arkansas, Hillary saw an opportunity of marrying Clinton for political reasons, because she gets the title of Clinton, and she was just an ordinary Wellesley College graduate before she went to Arkansas. So Arkansas has given her a platform, and she was able to carry out. And in fact, when she was when Bill Clinton was elected governor, the people in Arkansas said, "Well, maybe we elected the wrong Clinton," because Hillary was much more talented in the law. Bill was a kind of a backslapping old boy, you know. I got the old Arkansas hillbilly vote. That's what he did.
Yeah.
But Hillary has a better education from Wellesley. So she has more sophisticated.
And she grew up in Illinois versus Arkansas, two different worlds.
She came from a higher class.
Yeah.
So she married downscale for the name Clinton.
Yeah.
And that's the criticism of Hillary. Where does Hillary get her money? Well, she got it through legal policies, and she was too ambitious. So the anti-Hillary people are really pushing that money angle.
Yeah.
And they say, well, she's really a phony Methodist, a phony Christian.
But
And
my
each
question
individual
basically-
each individual has to decide that for
Yeah.
himself. Do you believe Hillary or do you believe
right.
Trump?
But from a religious standpoint, how are religious people, how do they regard Hillary Clinton?
Well, there are two kinds of religions. There are liberals and reactionary evangelicals.
Right.
That's the word that's missing here, is reactionary.
Yeah.
The reactionary looks to Pope Pius XII as the last word. They look at popes and decisions made years ago,
Yeah.
centuries ago.
Right.
The Bible as it was originally written.
David, would you like to address that as far as religion and Hillary Clinton and her followers are concerned?
Well, Hillary Clinton's support.
She claims to be a Methodist, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she has been in public life a Methodist. Again, the lines, according to the Pew Research Center, fall roughly the same as they did in 2012. So Trump's support among white evangelical voters is on par with Romney's, and Clinton's support among people who respond to have no religious affiliation is on par with Obama's. I think that she is popular among liberal Catholics and liberal Protestants, but obviously not as popular among the white evangelical Protestants. She is much more popular among people who don't have a religious, or claim not to have a religious affiliation, or associate themselves as either atheist or agnostic. And that represents, for instance, it's interesting, white evangelical Protestants make up 1/5 of all registered voters in the U.S. and roughly 1/3 of all voters in the Republican Party. Religious nuns who don't have an affiliation now constitute 1/5 of all registered voters as well, and more than 1/4 of the Democratic and Democratic-leaning registered voters. So I think that it really kind of comes down to party lines in that respect to her. Liberal religious people tend to support her, whereas the hardline evangelicals still go with their pact with the Republican Party that's been in place pretty much since the Reagan coalition, that they will support the Republican candidates as long as the Republican candidates agree to do, what they want on their very specific issues, including same-sex marriage and abortion.
Okay, very good. Robert, do you want to follow up on that? Or?
My only footnote to this is that the word evangelical, there's 60 million of them, is very...
You're always good, Professor Whaley, you're always good to give a definition of each word.
The
you
word
use.
evangelical is exceedingly vague. It comes from John the Baptist. It means sincere, pious behavior, okay? Well, I would say that there are conservative evangelicals, reactionary evangelicals, and there are some liberal evangelicals. And that's what people don't realize, that Protestantism is based on an individual interpretation. Mm-hmm. Some people follow the minister, some people follow, well, I got my own interpretation of the Bible, which I read. And here was an interesting thing on the birth control thing. 85% of the Protestants don't believe the Pope on birth control. And 87% of the Catholics don't believe the Pope on. In other words, the Catholic women are just as liberal as the Protestant women on this fanatic thing of no artificial device for birth control.
Yeah.
Now, with abortion, you have a big division.
Yeah.
There are some people who say, okay, I'll use birth control devices, and I don't have any problem with pills. But late-term abortion, that gets on the line of murder. Right. And that's what the Pence people want to do, is stop abortion on the fringes.
Yeah.
Make the so-called free love lady who wants to have abortion, okay, well, you've got to go to an expensive hospital before we do it. We're not going to give you an overnight abortion. You've got to get permission from your parents. So that's what they're trying to do, is harass young women who would like to have a quickie.
Yeah.
I met a lady in campus one time. She's long since graduated. I could hardly believe her. She was interested in reggae music. So she invites me to the bar to hear reggae. And she was kind of very open sexually. She was kind of making vague passes at me. And then she told me that she already had 2 abortions. I said, I can understand why somebody who would have an abortion, they slip up with someone. But why did you have 2? But she was so ignorant about sexual behavior and wanted her own emotions that, that second abortion was expensive. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Yeah. I just said, well, I'll see you later, lady. Don't want to talk to you again.
What?
You're beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Because I'm a married guy, and I'm still married.
Yeah.
I'm one of the most conservative religious people on the campus.
That's true.
There are 3 others that are more conservative.
Okay. And we get a conservative associate editor here too.
Is that right?
Perhaps, I don't know.
I don't know.
Go ahead, David. You want
think
to
of
say
many
something?
ways that I
you want to say
might be
something?
considered
Go ahead.
conservative. Well, one thing that I did want to point out with, I've been talking about white evangelicals supporting Trump by and large, but there has been a development of a generational gap between the white evangelicals themselves. For instance, as the Christian Science Monitor recently reported, students at Liberty University recently disavowed their own university president, Jerry Falwell Jr.'s support of Trump because Jerry Falwell Jr. has been a vocal supporter of Trump throughout this campaign, and a student group actually formed to repudiate him for that support, releasing a statement that went viral online. And I think it's an interesting statement and gives a little insight into their thinking and this generational gap, so I'm going to read it here. They said, and this is a group called Liberty United Against Trump.
Liberty United Against Trump. That is an interesting comment.
And they said, we are Liberty students are disappointed with President Falwell's endorsement and are tired of being associated with one of the worst presidential candidates in American history. Donald Trump does not represent our values, and we want nothing to do with him. And this was, this to me is a culmination of a development that we began to see in 2008 after the George W. Bush administration, of very Christian people rejecting the hawkish war posture of the Bush administration, especially younger religious people, rejecting that, rejecting the antipathy toward people in poverty and those on welfare, rejecting the cavalier attitude toward the environment and Mother Earth herself. And so I think it's interesting that, at least among young self-identifying evangelicals, there has been a movement more toward a liberal philosophy with regard to those issues, at least, with regard to peace, with regard to the environment, and with regard to anti-poverty efforts. Yeah. So that'll be an interesting development as they get older.
Liberty College, was it the only... Did you read about, somebody like Bob Jones University or any of those other schools down there? I
didn't see anything specific from them, whether similar groups have been formed, but I have seen, polls that indicate that this gap exists on the religious side of the equation between younger voters and older voters. And you see people like... like second generation of religious leaders. Now, Falwell Jr. isn't one of them, but there are multiple other people who were very involved in the Reagan coalition who have now come out and rejected Trump and everything that he stands for, and said that this is not
Yeah.
the Republican Party that we've
Yeah,
supported.
you're starting to. There are the second generation Bible colleges and all that. I know Oral Roberts University out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Richard Roberts
Right,
runs that now, and it'd be interesting to know what is happening in Oklahoma. But so, Robert, have you? I've got a question for you. Here on the campus, you interact with students all the time. Have they come forward and said any thing about who they support, whether it be Hillary Clinton or,
Well, all
or
the
Donald
students,
Trump?
all of the students I meet are for Hillary or Bernie originally,
Yeah,
and there are some Bernie people who are troubled of either going with Hillary or with a third-party candidate,
yeah,
and so they have their own little personal. But I have never met one who wanted Donald Trump. No,
yeah.
never. I think.
Well, there's some here on campus. I remember when Bill Clinton came.
Yeah, there
here,
is a Republican Party.
Yeah.
And Richard Vedder spoke to them.
Yeah,
And this is a small group of students.
yeah,
I think Richard Vedder is a dogmatic, old-time Catholic who puts Catholicism above his economics. He's supposedly an economist, but he gave a Catholic answer.
yeah,
I thought his letter was a disaster.
yeah.
I think there are only 3 faculty people who support Trump,
Yeah.
and I've never met a student, but I've met a very interesting Jewish student, very interesting.
Well, I just want to mention this. You mentioned Richard Vedder. Also, there, and I'm not going to name him, but there is another economist
Yeah.
in the area that is a Trump supporter. Matter of fact, he has the signs in his yard.
Okay,
So,
well, we'll leave his
yeah.
name off.
yeah. Well, he might not want me
Richard
to
Vedder
mention
went
him.
public.
Yeah. Well, yes. Everybody knows
Actually,
Richard
there will
Vedder.
be another debate tomorrow evening happening locally between Richard Vedder and David Wilhelm, who was
David Wilhelm is the liberal.
Yes, David Wilhelm is an Athens native who served as Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign manager and as chairman of the DNC. He's now a venture capitalist. But it'll be their third meeting. They met first in 2009 to discuss the Obama administration at that date. Then they had a debate in 2012 with Vedder supporting Romney and Wilhelm
Now,
supporting
where's this
Obama.
going to take place?
This is going to be on the OU campus, and
Baker Center? Or?
I believe it's going to be at the Baker Center Theater. I really should know that specifically, but
I will
will
not be
look it up.
attending.
I will be attending as a
Journalist.
intrepid journalist.
Well, you can make
Yeah.
an
Cover
Well,
it
you
for
know-
all of you who are unable
Yeah,
to
Have
make
you
it.
met David Wilhelm before?
Oh, yeah, I know David.
I've met
I know
David
David and
Wilhelm,
Richard,
and
yeah.
it had nothing to do with politics, but I met him years ago, and seems like a very nice guy.
Well, he has a long history, political history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He got his political science degree from Ohio University. His father was Hubert Wilhelm,
Right.
a geologist. His father was practically my same age, identical. And he fled from East Germany in 45.
Yeah.
And he was very interesting religiously.
Yeah.
He met a lady from Illinois in the 4-H club. He's the only guy I know who married the first girl he met, and they
Yeah.
lived happily ever after.
Well, that's good. That
So
is
they had a
rare
unique
thing.
marriage. But he was desperate as a displaced person,
Yeah.
and she accepted him, and that's been a wonderful marriage.
Robert, let's take a station break.
Okay. This is called Athens Speakout. We're debating the Trump-Hillary debate, and unfortunately there's not much debate because both Dave DeWitt and I, as a historian, retired historian from Ohio University, support the lesser of two evils, namely Hillary Clinton, but he used to be a Bernie Sanders socialist, so I'm to the left of most of my colleagues. Anyway, I would like to continue with a slightly different subject, if I have the floor. Last week, Dave and I got into a long-standing debate we've had about the character of Henry Kissinger and the balance of power philosophy. And this is the problem of how the United States government dealt with Vietnam, China, and Russia. And Dave and I disagree about the procedures of international law. And he is, from a political point of view, quite right. Henry Kissinger was not a very good Democrat, and he was responsible for some bad policies in East Timor and Chile and so forth. So he was rather repressive politically, but as a balance of power shrewd politician, he pulled off somewhat of a miraculous campaign to defend Richard Nixon and get him reelected in 1972, and at the same time got Nixon out of the Vietnam War.
Right.
Now that takes a man of balance of power talent.
Yeah. Robert, I know that you respected Henry Kissinger. Of course, you know, you were following all that very closely at the time that it took place. And I doubt that David was even on the planet, but I don't think David is a fan of Henry Kissinger. Could you give us a reason why you're not?
Yes, because he's committed atrocities, he's committed war crimes, and I think that he should be prosecuted for them and held to account. I think that we owe it to the international community, we owe it to American standards, we owe it to the Geneva Convention, we owe it to our own sense of morality and our own moral weight in the international community to prosecute him for the horrific crimes that he's committed
now,
in our name.
Robert, Henry Kissinger was in the State Department at the time that
Well, he
David
was
made
first
such
national security advisor, and then he was in the State Department.
Right. Now, do you don't hold those same views as far as
that's right.
thinking that he should be prosecuted for war crimes or
that's
anything
right.
of that
you
nature?
See, the problem with international law is that it is a beautiful ideal, but the problem of international law is who does the enforcement. So international law is something like medieval law, like the Holy Roman Empire in 900 AD, okay? It was a nice empire, but it was neither holy or Roman nor an empire. So the most famous trial that I take of an example of a trial which had prosecution were the Nuremberg trials. And at the IMT, the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, put on trial 22 top Nazis. Well, the reason why that was possible is that the four powers had divided Germany, and Germany had no sovereignty. So Stalin had his own prosecutor. Truman appointed a prosecutor, namely a Supreme Court justice by the name of Jackson, and Jackson was the chief prosecutor for the Americans. The British had a prosecutor, and the French had a prosecutor. Well, the only rights the Nazis were given was they had the right to a German lawyer. But in some ways, this is a unfair trial, and there are some people who don't like the Nuremberg trials, especially Germans, because the judge and the prosecutor and the jury were all of the same party.
Yeah.
That's not as good as the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has a division of powers between the states, between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So you get a much better trial in the Supreme Court.
Exactly. Now, can you, for the audience, can
I respond to that
Yeah.
really quickly? I'm glad that you brought up the Nuremberg Tribunal, because one of the biggest advocates for and I think one of the greatest authorities for the prosecution of Henry Kissinger is actually General Telford Taylor, one of the major prosecutors at
That's
the
true.
Nuremberg
That is true.
Tribunal. And Taylor's case, which I'm just pretty much going to crib verbatim here,
Right.
is that the illegal nature of many of the acts undertaken by the United States in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam era.
In Southeast Asia,
And so
yeah.
this is Taylor's view.
That's right.
Kissinger recommended and supervised extensive bombing raids in Laos and Cambodia, misusing Nixon's constitutional authority as commander-in-chief. You could argue usurping it.
Very true.
These were numerous secret raids that were conducted by B-52 stratofortresses that released millions of tons of bombs indiscriminately over the Laotian and Cambodian countryside, killing uncountable thousands of civilians. Now, this is a military attack across the borders of a country that the United States was not at war with. And that is illegal under international military and legal conventions.
Illegal as a theory.
That the United States is a signatory to.
That's
we
true.
have signed these as,
Right.
And so General Taylor, using his exact quote, calls this an act of aggressive war
That's true.
and plainly a war crime against civilians.
Okay.
Now, you could point out that this type of idea was actually fairly common in America, that this was a war crime and this was an aggressive act of war against civilians
Right.
in a country that the United States was not at war against.
Okay.
Until the Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon realist school of foreign policy. The United States had consistently opposed such acts of international military aggression up until the Kissinger era.
I
Okay,
think,
I have a question for David,
Okay.
and you might be able to elaborate on it.
Okay.
Did the press bring this up at the time? Did anybody call for prosecuting Henry Kissinger?
yeah, McGovern,
Yeah, there were.
George McGovern did?
yeah,
There have been various.
Fulbright,
Yeah,
McGovern,
mostly peace people.
Wayne Morse. They denounced Johnson as being a war criminal, but that's only an allegation.
Yeah.
You got to have a sheriff to arrest them and put them on trial.
Well, I
and
think
that-
that these military acts were fact. I mean,
No,
we know
they're
that
an
these things happen.
They're a fact, but it's an allegation. How do you get the charge of crime?
That's a distinction without difference to me.
We
I
all
mean,
know the
we
mafia.
know
We
that
all
they
know the
happen.
mafia murders people. But how do you get Al Capone in jail? That's the problem.
I think what Robert's saying is, how would you have got somebody to investigate those bombings and everything like that? Even though we knew they took place, they were ordered to take place, but who would actually do the investigation?
Now, if McGovern got elected, and McGovern said we're going to have a special prosecutor, like they did for for Bill Clinton, and we'd put these Republicans on trial, then you'd have a trial. But you got to have
Right.
that special prosecutor.
Well, because the United States is the dominant hegemonic power of the time.
That's right. Politics, power that's the balance.
But
of power.
I would argue that it's ethically incumbent
Ethically,
upon
that's true.
us to
Sure, I
to be
think-
better than that.
I think that Telford Taylor is a better ethical lawyer than Henry Kissinger. That's all I'm saying. And I agree with you on that. But I think that Henry
But
Kissinger...
that's just Laos and Cambodia. We could go on and
Yes,
on about his
Laos-
various other atrocities.
Yeah, we can bring in
in
Chile
Bangladesh and
Bangla-
East
yeah,
Timor
yeah,
and Chile and Cyprus.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the difference between power and law. And that's being confused all the time. There is ideology, there is political power, and that means might makes right. And then there is the law, which says that there is an ethical standard that's above power. Well, the League of Nations was ineffective because it had no enforcement. The United Nations has been largely ineffective because you have to have a unanimity of the Security Council. And when the United States and China disagree, they take a vote. And it's largely resolutions.
Right.
Well, we all know that in the case of Israel, Resolution 242, nobody can get the Israelis on trial as long as you have Resolution 242. You know what 242 says? 1967? It's Johnson. Johnson got that through. it said that this was after Moshe.
After the 67 war.
Moshe Dayan was purely an aggressor.
Yeah.
Militarily, he more than doubled the size of Israel. And he conquered the Sinai, and he conquered the Golan Heights. And so, okay, 242 was a nice resolution. It says Israel has a duty to withdraw, provided, and this is the escape clause, Israel gets secure boundaries. Well, how do you define secure boundaries? So we still have Netanyahu in there, and to my knowledge, there's no American government who has the...
They never intend to have secure boundaries, I don't
Though
think.
there's no American... The question now is money. Obama is somewhat critical of Netanyahu, but you don't see Obama nor Hillary saying, we suggest we cut off their money. No, as long as the United States gives Israel a blank check, $3 billion a year, the Israelis can keep on killing Palestinians for the next 10 years at least. Now, now we come to Syria. Obama can conquer Syria or it can backfire. So Hillary's going to have trouble. If Hillary gets elected, she's going to have trouble with the state of Israel and the enforcement of that. No, I think international law is a great ideal. The problem is, how do you enforce it? The Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration of Human Rights is a great declaration. But the United States didn't sign it until 1978. It was one of the last powers to sign it. And the reason is they couldn't get 2/3 of the Southern senators to vote for that. Well, finally they got the Southern senators, because the United States was being laughed at, the only country in the world not supporting the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. Well, finally, when the Democrats had some power in '78, they got it through. But they're not doing much enforcement. So that's the difference between ideals and reality.
Right.
Yeah, Henry Kissinger was a realistic balance of power authority who got practical results for Richard Nixon. And he got practical results in getting out of the Vietnam quagmire.
Right.
And that enabled the United States to play politics and diplomacy by giving the United Nations seat to Beijing. And Kissinger was saying, okay, we now have a diplomatic debate between Soviet Union and Beijing, and we'd rather solve the nuclear arms race by diplomacy rather than action. So Kissinger is part of the disarmament process. He got through some of those disarmament treaties, and that led to Ronald Reagan even getting more. Yeah. So we're in better shape between the United States and the Soviet Union on the arms race. The problem now is Korea, Iran, and the 9 powers. So I'd like to see the nuclear arms agreements expanded. Well, anyway, I guess we have enough on Henry Kissinger. One is looking at it from a realistic point of view, that the judge and treaties define international law, and it depends upon the United States and Russia to make new treaties regarding Syria. Otherwise, you're just going to have more killing of Syrians. That's the unfortunate truth. Okay?
Well, I just want to, I'll acknowledge that Henry Kissinger did make a lot of advanced maneuvers using the balance of power game to advance America's agenda. He also, I'll restate my position.
Atrocities.
My belief, and he hasn't been convicted in any sort of court, that he committed a lot of atrocities and war crimes. He committed political assassination.
That's true.
Countries that we weren't at war with.
Right.
And here's where, and I know that this is ideological, and perhaps it's as incumbent, maybe we can't rely on the international courts. Maybe it is something that's incumbent on the United States to live up to its own ideals in our own courtrooms, because we're supposed to be the ethical and political leader of the free world.
We used to be very good in 45, but it's declining, yeah.
The nation that is committed to the precepts of constitutional Republican democracy and the rule of law. and not powerful, violent, ambitious men like Henry Kissinger.
You are an idealist. I'm an
And
idealist.
I think that if that's the case, then Henry Kissinger should be investigated and prosecuted by a jury
But
in the United States.
Well, anyway, he's retired. They're more pressing current business. I think the real problem is how, if Hillary is elected, how will she enforce international law? Or will she keep playing power politics?
Well, we have
And
an interesting situation right now with
With
the
Syria.
siege on Mosul,
Yeah.
because this is going to be the siege on. So what's happening right now is that Iraqi and Kurdish forces are laying siege to the northern Iraqi city of Mosul,
Right.
which has been an ISIS-Daesh stronghold for several years now. It's actually where al-Baghdadi declared the Islamic State in
Right.
Mosul itself. So the Obama administration has been taking a tactic so far of
Right.
trying to let others lead the way, trying to let the
Right.
Iraqi military and the Kurdish Peshmerga lead the way and fight these battles themselves with only a token amount of American forces in the back lines. I think we've got about 5,000 soldiers a couple miles behind the front lines, radio advising what to do, specified airstrikes. But this battle for Mosul will be, if the Obama administration can accomplish it, and if they can accomplish it before the end of his term in January, it will be a vindication of sorts that America doesn't have to lead the way with our own ground troops all the time, and that we can lend a supportive position, and the Iraqis and the Kurdish military can do it themselves. If for some reason we are unable to take Mosul, then it's going to be a major blow to the
That's
Obama
right.
administration's
That's
foreign
true.
policy in Syria.
That's true.
So that's something to follow. And if you want to catch up on that stuff, there's actually a great Frontline documentary. Their most recent Frontline, Confronting ISIS, is
Right.
out, and it's very informative.
Keep tuned. There could be some change of votes between now
Okay.
and November.
David, let's get back on the subject of, that was very interesting, by the way, on Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And how do you predict Trump will do in the Las Vegas debate that's coming up here on the 19th of October? I guess that's tomorrow evening, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that he is going to continue to do what he has done in the debates, which is to under-prepare and over-dramatize. In essence, treat it as though he's on the Jerry Springer show instead of in a debate for the presidency of the United States. That seems to be what he thinks he's doing. It might be good entertainment, but it's bad for the country.
So he will lose the debate.
He'll lose the debate by, he won't know the issues like he hasn't
Right.
known the issues.
Right.
He won't respond to the questions with any degree of accuracy or
Right.
truthfulness, as
Right.
he has not responded to any questions with any degree of accuracy and truthfulness. He'll deflect, he'll blame, he'll call, most dangerously, he'll call the election rigged.
He
and
will.
claim
He's
that
going to claim that,
democracy-
that's for
yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Now, the problem there is who defines rigged?
Right.
That's an inflated word, like revolution.
Yeah. David, I have a further question for you. What do you suppose, I mean, this is all speculation on our part, but what do you suppose that they're going to talk about tomorrow night?
Well, that'll be interesting because the questions, I'm not sure what technique Fox is using to generate the questions. So at the last debate, they used polls and had audience members read
Chris
the questions.
Wallace is
It's
gonna
Chris
be the
Wallace
moderator?
from Fox News, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's going to moderate this last one. And I honestly just don't know what technique they're using to generate the questions or if they have a specific focus.
Okay.
Well-
I want to ask Robert, how do you think Trump's going to do tomorrow
Well,
night?
I will fill in that question a little bit. I understand that Chris Wallace is going to dominate the agenda, and he's going to make foreign policy the chief issue. And he knows that Clinton, former Secretary of State, is well informed on foreign policy. And he's going to try and dump Trump, no doubt.
Yeah.
Trump is going to say, I believe in war. I believe in giving everybody a nuclear bomb. I mean, Trump will trip over. I don't know what Trump will do, but I think he's going to get.
Do you think there's going to be any questions about WikiLeaks or?
Yes, they're going to. Yeah, that'll be a false issue. Who knows what the Russians kept? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have access to C-SPAN. I know how to use email, but I don't know what an algorithm, new mathematics.
Well, you're probably sitting beside a guy that knows a little bit about.
Yeah. Well, you can allege anything.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting if Trump ends up defending the actions of Russian hackers in some way, and they're meddling in United States elections. He's really going to have a tightrope there, and he doesn't seem to know how to walk a tightrope very well. He seems to be more 600-pound gorilla crashing through the room type of a guy.
Straddle it, perhaps.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting because just in the past several days, him and Mike Pence, his vice presidential nominee, have blatantly contradicted each other on what they believe the role of Russia has been in this election. And more disturbingly to me, and I think disturbing to the intelligence community in general, is that Donald Trump has received multiple intelligence briefings telling him that Russian hackers are specifically meddling in this election, and he has rejected that outright. Now, that's dangerous for...
He does more than the generals. He made that statement.
Well, he did claim that, but he's gone from just claiming it to actually acting on it and publicly contradicting the reports that he's receiving.
He's promised the moon, but he's got to get elected
from
first.
Intelligence conviction. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a
So if Russia comes up, it's going to be it's going to be good. Yeah, it's going to be good television.
But it may well satisfy some people in Southeast Ohio who are only high school graduates who don't know much about the law.
Yeah, or international foreign policy. I didn't realize it was going to focus on foreign policy like that, but.
Well, how are we doing for time? Have I got something more
you're
to say?
fine, Robert. Keep right on talking.
Okay, well, I would like to say something about this last question. I've been following a pollster by the name of Larry Sabato. On the 12th of October. He claims that Clinton is way ahead in the Electoral College, and there are 10 swing states, and she can get only one of them and win, where Donald Trump needs to take 2 of them in order to win. In order to get to get the 270 votes. That's the key.
He is a professor at the University of Virginia.
That's the man.
Yeah.
So Trump has only a small chance to get that necessary 270. 1 in 9. So he gives a 1 in 9 odds. Okay. Ohio is too close to call, and that figure seems to be holding up. Pennsylvania is definitely going to Clinton. Others are saying it's a little bit touch and go. But anyway, Sabato has predicted Pennsylvania for Clinton. Sabato predicts the Senate race is absolutely stalemated. And he's not going to make any prediction on the Senate until the 7th of November, because that's going to follow the House of Representatives and Ryan and the fallout of the vote on the downscale of the ballot. Okay.
Another good guy. I don't know if you've seen him or not. He was Jimmy Carter's political strategist, Pat. Do you happen to know his last name, David?
Pat Caddell?
No.
I'm not sure. No.
But
I don't know a Pat.
Yeah, you see him on Fox News, but he is a Democrat strategist who he seems to be able to lay it out there. And, you know, even Krauthammer and company seem to agree with what he's saying as far as what it looks like, you know. But, go ahead.
Well, I think that's why we're seeing Donald Trump make these assertions about the rigged election, because he knows that he's doomed. There's very few ways to victory for Donald Trump at this point, and But talking about a rigged election, first of all, there's two ways to rig an election, I guess, and what he's referring to, it appears, is media rigging or media collusion, as he would seem to imply.
There's no doubt the media is biased.
But
They've always been biased.
Yeah.
the other problem is that he's also telling people to go to the polls and watch the polls, and he's talking about poll locations in big cities and encouraging and I don't know what that's going to lead to, but the interesting thing about it is the Senate races to me, because if he's going to claim that something was rigged about the vote, that's going to put into question the victories that Senate Republicans do have.
Right. We're going to have to stop right there, David. I'm going to give Robert a minute, and David will have a minute.
We've been summarizing the vice presidential debate and the importance of religion. It seems that the two vice presidential candidates are more interested in Christianity, and that both the presidential candidates are a little bit weak. Hillary does have some weaknesses on the sex question she hasn't explained, and she has some weaknesses on finance. We haven't really gotten to the bottom of where Hillary gets her money. So they're both telling lies, Hillary and Trump, but I think that it's about 10 to 1 for every lie that Hillary makes. Trump is making 9 of them.
Okay, David, if you want to finish up the program here.
Well, I think that it seems like the religious voters, at least from what I can tell after researching it this week, are faced with the same question that a lot of us are, whether our voting is based around religion or not. And that's that they tend to be voting against one candidate instead of in favor of the other.
Right.
And so a lot of the religious votes are either against Trump or against Clinton specifically.
Right.
And I think that a lot of us find ourselves in that situation where it's the lesser of two evils thing. And the reason why I believe in lesser of two evils voting is the same argument spelled out by Professor Noam Chomsky, and that's that it's not as selfish. You can't be selfish about it, because it's not, casting my vote isn't about making myself feel good. It's about protecting the people in our society that are most vulnerable. And so I'm willing, living in a swing state, to vote for the lesser of two evils.
I have to wrap it up.
To protect the most
Okay,
vulnerable.
well, we've had an interesting debate. Debate is the oxygen of democracy, and I'm glad that Dave DeWitt is still keeping the door open. And we'll have to have one next week.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
Following up what happened at Las Vegas.
Here we go again.